We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our final segment this morning with Professor John Weil over at MTSU. Professor Weil, all right, give me some more thoughts just as we sit here now. It's our final segment. And folks, would you imagine right now, I saw some numbers this morning as I was anchoring the morning newscast, between what percent of Republicans, polled anyway, and again, polling, I'm sorry, I don't even want to go there, folks, but I thought this was interesting, have decided that they are not going to vote for President Trump and will vote for Joe Biden. And on the other hand, there is a percentage that vote Democrat last election and say they will now vote for President Trump. How much of that do you think will actually come about? And how many fence sitters could actually be out there right now, which I just simply can't imagine, because there is so much difference between these two candidates.
There is not as many, the political term for this is a mugwump, whose mug is on one side of the fence and his wump is on the other. I don't think there'll be as many mugwumps this year, but it will be interesting to see whether in the Republican convention next week we have the same attempt that we're having among the Democrats. Democrats are consciously making an effort to bring forth moderate Republicans who say that it's okay to vote for Biden. He's not a big risk. It'll be interesting to see if we have the same thing among Democrats. I was just reading a study yesterday in the one of the publications of the American Political Science Association that cataloged all presidents in American history, and to date, the most divisive is Donald Trump. And you see people probably spread farther apart on this issue than you do in many other. It was common. You remember George Wallace used to say that there wasn't a dime's worth of difference between the people in the two political parties, and to some degree he was right. To some degree they tended to be in the moderate middle, and this year I think is very different.
It is, okay. And so the fact that it's different, I mean, is it going to sway more one way or the other?
Well, again, I think that probably the biggest determinant of the election will not so much be how many Republicans vote Democrat and how many Democrats vote Republican as how many of both party members are going to turn out. And again, to go back to the Harris factor, vice presidents as a rule are not that important in terms of elections, but she could be a factor that will affect turnout, and particularly turnout among African Americans, among Hispanic Americans, among women, could be the decisive factor this year.
And just as I'm thinking back to the last presidential election and some of the big issues that came to the forefront, and one that just keeps coming back to me, of course, was the whole illegal immigration issue and the wall and how that took hold and really had a life of its own, and really early on, I think, propelled President Trump to where he is today. That really got the ball rolling for him. I don't see for either candidate something along those lines. I think that right now the pandemic transcends everything, okay? And it certainly has an effect on the economy and all of that, but it transcends absolutely everything, and it's like nothing we saw before. But I just wonder if that the voter is going to look at that. And I know still abortion rights are an issue out there, and anti-abortion groups and Supreme Court, and that stuff is all still there. So is immigration. But that this is so important, the pandemic and how it's handled, that could be the litmus test for a lot of voters if they think, look, it's just getting worse, or we don't like how it's going, or we think it's going right and we're going to keep on this path.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you saw last night, the main emphasis, a lot of it became character, but the stated emphasis was on leadership. And I think for many people, the coronavirus has been emblematic of what they consider to be, a president who's more interested in, good on television shows, good at getting publicity, good at stirring emotions, but maybe, and this is somewhat surprising for, someone who's made billions of dollars in his life, but not really that focused on the individual day-to-day leadership issues. So I think, basic, leadership competence. Do you know how to make government work? And, we haven't talked about it today, but I think there's also a fair number of concern among foreign policy experts that, American foreign policy has drifted, that, we've moved away from our allies. our policies seem to be somewhat erratic. We don't arguably have the same respect in the world that we did 3 or 4 years ago. So that might also be an issue.
Interesting. And with regard to the other races, oftentimes, you talk about presidential coattails. What are we looking at in the Senate and the House this presidential election and how things shake out? Seems fairly certain to me, as it is in the state of Tennessee, that there will be a Republican replacing Lamar Alexander, though I know there's a Democrat running against, but we know that's an uphill battle. But nationwide, how does the count look in the Senate and the House?
Well, I think certainly there seems to be a reasonable chance that the Democrats could take over in the Senate. It's interesting, before coronavirus, for better or worse, a lot of Republicans have sort of put all their eggs in the Trump basket. And when Trump is riding high, that works very well for them. I don't think it's worked that well over the past 3 or 4 months, and between now and election time, who knows? But there's always a danger when you elevate any single political figure, and particularly when you're doing it perhaps at the cost of some of your earlier policies. As long as that person's riding high, fine, but when they're not, you can all go down together.
Now, is that not true most of the time anyway, regardless of who that is with, or is it perhaps more true in some way with President Trump? Because I know there are some that will argue that, yes, we know he is a Republican, but he is a Republican unlike any we've ever seen before, and he's kind of unto himself, and that if and when the situation comes, be it now or in 4 years, he leaves, what will go into the void there, since he seems to be so different from many more of the other Republicans that are out there today?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me, and they're free to, but the best thing that it might be a better thing for Republicans 4 years from now if Trump isn't president than if he is. But again, as we talked about polls before, the only poll that counts is the poll that takes place on election day or the weeks leading up to it, if we're going to count the ballots by mail.
Yeah, well, and my take is that, this is going to be a race, folks. This is going to be a race. Anyone who thinks this is going to be a landslide, one way or the other, you're in a dream world. It's going to be close. That's my take on this, because the country is so evenly split in so many ways, and the president certainly still has many of his core supporters. Let's see if we can squeeze Ricky in real quick. Ricky, good morning. Go ahead, Ricky.
Good morning. I got 2 short questions.
Okay.
Are they going to send another stimulus package out? I keep hearing that. And my second question, why don't they get some kind of computer that just x-rays the stamps to see who voted and whose name and everything like that? It'd be a whole lot faster.
Yeah, I don't know about the computer and the technology part of it, but I'm glad Ricky brought that up about the stimulus. Now, we know the president on his own, I think through executive order, did he not approve monies for unemployment to extend a certain degree of federal funding, but that the states have to pitch in, and not all the states have opted to do so. I think Tennessee just did this week.
That's correct. And there are, in fact, there's some questions as to the constitutionality of some of what he's done. As a general rule, Congress is supposed to appropriate, not the president. So we will see.
Yeah, okay, I'm wondering. But too, a stimulus, if a stimulus comes from Congress and the president were to sign it, I don't know when it'll come. We've heard talk of that, but it just doesn't seem like the Democrats and the Republicans can get together, or certainly that the House and the Senate are meeting on the same page. And they're not, and there's some disagreement as to whether or not a stimulus is the right thing right now, to put just more money into people's pockets, as opposed to maybe coming up with something that helps support some of the businesses or get the employment back up and running.
I mean, I think there's general agreement among economists that, if there's ever a time where you can have some deficit spending, stimulus of some kind, this is it.
Yeah.
You're right. I thought last time, frankly, some of the money was wasted. I got a check. I didn't need it. Mm-hmm. And it seems like, maybe it would have gone better to businesses that were faltering or people that were unemployed, that sort of thing. I think there's about a bit, there was some negotiation between the Democrats and Republicans, and the Democrats, as I understand, sort of offered to split it in the middle, and Trump said no. So one of the, it looked for a while like he was dangling out some of the funding for the post office as a possible, something that he could give on this, but right now it's not yet resolved.
All right, it is going to be very interesting, Professor. I imagine MTSU, students returning to campus now, and the political campaign with what it is you teach, that's something I'm sure you'll be discussing with your students as you follow.
Absolutely.
And you have a new building, I hear.
We do. Yesterday we dedicated a new building, a classroom building for our College of Behavioral and Health Sciences. It's about a $40 million building. It's going to serve criminal justice administration, psychology, and social work. Has some beautiful labs. It's a beautiful building outside, and it joins. As you may know, we have a great natural science building. It's like $140 million 5 or 6 years ago. So we're a bustling place. I think in the last since the current president, we've had almost $1 billion worth of expenditures and improvements. Hope some students come.
Yeah, well, I certainly do. And I know they're returning to campus today. My son is heading, as you know, he's at UT and getting started on all that. I wish you stay safe, and I hope as school gets up and running, not just at the lower levels, but at the collegiate, everyone can find a way to stay safe. And let's make it through and hopefully not have to shut things down. Take care of yourself, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, bye. Thank you.
Take a break. When we come back, programming note about tomorrow. Stick around, everyone. We'll be right back.